Not a fun game for the Orioles at Fenway Park on Monday night, but potentially even less fun is when you really start to think about the timeline for Grayson Rodriguez. Will he even have time at this point to return to the Orioles rotation? We'll break down that and more coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, September 10th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap an ugly Orioles 12-3 loss to the Boston Red Sox on Monday night. Just 5 things you need to know from that one, including Adley Rutschman's bat turning it back around, but the Orioles offense still having its problems, and Cade Povich with a bit of an up and down start at Fenway Park. Then we'll get a couple of big Orioles injury updates. One about Grayson Rodriguez and the concerning part of his potential timeline to return, and one much more positive about the impending return of maybe the Orioles' best relief pitcher in Danny Coulombe. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So we will begin this one with quite an ugly loss at Fenway Park. Game 1 of a 3-game set between the O's and the Sox, their final meeting in 2024, and the final score is the Boston Red Sox 12 and the Orioles 3. It was not a pretty sight in Boston on Monday night. Orioles dropped to 82 and 63 on the season. They have now lost 4 of their last 5 games, and unfortunately, we'll get to what was in one way an Orioles bullpen meltdown, although they used, you could argue, their 4 worst relievers in this game, so it's not a full meltdown. The only team that had a bigger bullpen meltdown, unfortunately, was the Kansas City Royals, who started a series at Yankee Stadium on Monday night, and they completely fell apart in the 7th and the 8th. Yankees beat the Royals 10-4, so the Yankees open up a 1.5 game lead over the Orioles in the AL East. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 12-3 loss to the Red Sox. And the first thing you need to know is the Orioles just continued to leave runners on base. Now, to put it in perspective, I would, at the very least, rather have a game like Monday than we saw really in the previous 4 games. The O's 1 loss to the White Sox, then losing 2 out of 3 to the Rays, in which they scored 4 runs in 4 games combined. And while they did have their struggles with runners in scoring position, they only had 1 hit in those scenarios over the weekend against the Rays, and it didn't even score a run. They barely had any opportunities because they just weren't getting guys on base, and they weren't even getting guys into scoring position, let alone having a chance to bring them home. Now, Monday was a little bit different. Like, the Orioles started hot. Gunnar Henderson doubles, Santander singles him home. 3 batters in, it's 1-0 Orioles. They load the bases with 1 out in the top of the first against Brian Bayo. He's into the high 20s in his pitch count. You're like, all right, this is starting well. Unfortunately, Eloy Jimenez and Colton Cowser strike out back-to-back to leave them loaded, but you still get a run. You get a good offensive start to the game, and you're feeling okay. And then you get yourself some more chances. You unfortunately leave the bases loaded again in the 4th inning, even after getting another run home on a bases loaded walk. And even though you're getting base runners throughout the game, the last couple of innings, they didn't do a lot, but you're getting base runners throughout the game. You end up going 2 for 11 with runners in scoring position and leaving 11 men on base. And that's much better than leaving, 4 on base where you're lifeless for 9 innings. The Orioles certainly had offensive life. You can't argue that. They just turn back around to the same issue of not getting the big hit in the big spot. And sometimes that can be bad luck. Sometimes that can be bad approach. Sometimes that can be bad quality of contact. It's a little bit of all that right now for this Orioles team, which is starting to get frustrated, I think. And John Meoli had a good piece in the Baltimore Banner, I believe, on Monday, talking about how he wasn't any more concerned than he's been recently with the Orioles' very recent, last 4 or 5 game stretch here, really last 4 game stretch when he wrote the piece, because it was before Monday's game, how they'd score the 4 runs in 4 games. What he was more concerned with, and I really agreed with what he wrote here, is that it wasn't about the O's approach or how they played. They've had some bad stretches this year, but it was specifically about what the Orioles said, both Brandon Hyde and really the hitters on this ball club said after Sunday's loss to the Rays. And it was a lot more of, hey, we need to change the approach. We need to put the ball in play more. We need to shorten up with 2 strikes. And all those things are well and good to say, and you hear it from a lot of fans. But the O's have a way that they go about their business. They go about looking to do damage, and they haven't strayed from that line of thinking, that company line all year. And for the most part, it's worked out for them. But you're seeing them stray a little bit. And I'm unsure if that's totally a bad thing or totally a good thing. It could be somewhere in the middle. But I think what it tells me is there's just more frustration in that room from their own offensive performances, not really at each other, just probably more so for themselves than we've seen for most of the season. And unfortunately, it continued. I mean, they started this game 2 for 3 with runners in scoring position and then went over their next 8. So you like having the chances at the very least rather than not, but you got to bring some of these guys home, and somebody's just got to step up and take a big swing in one of these spots. And maybe it's tonight, but it certainly was not on Monday. Now, the second thing you need to know from this one is that Brandon Hyde has seen the big time struggles the O's had over the last 4 games. And you know what? He made a little bit of a lineup change. Cedric Mullins was hitting second behind Gunnar Henderson. It was the first time all season that Mullins had hit in the top 2 spots in the order. As you know, for a long time, Mullins was the leadoff hitter for this Orioles team. But him and Gunnar were the only 2 guys who have been hitting in this last 4-game stretch. So Hyde said, you know what? Let's put Gunnar and Mullins 1 and 2 and give them the most plate appearances. Now, Gunnar still did his thing. Mullins, not so much, had an 0 for 2 and then was pinch hit for when the lefty was up in a key spot by Austin Slater. But I like at least Brandon Hyde trying some things. He gets Anthony Santander back in the 3 hole, and Santander drives in all 3 runs, RBI single in the first, RBI walk in the 4th, and in his solo homer in the 7th, he got to that big round number, home run number 40 for Anthony Santander on the season. So he had a nice day driving in all 3 runs. And Kobe Mayo gets a start at third base, and Livan Soto gets his first start in an Oriole uniform, batting 9th and playing second base. 14th game that Soto has been on the Orioles active roster since they reacquired him at the trade deadline, acquiring him for the 3rd time this calendar year. And he gets his first start, and he looked okay. He looked really good defensively at second. He got on base. He drew a walk in his second plate appearance before he was pinch hit for again against a lefty. But I like, Hyde switching it up. He's been trying to do some switch ups at third, little Emmanuel Rivera, little Kobe Mayo, little Nick Maytime. You give Jackson Holiday a partial day off. You get Livan Soto in there. Holiday's been struggling as well. You're just trying to mix and match things. And I mean, Soto hit 460 plate appearances in his big league debut in 2022 with the Angels. So he's got good minor league numbers. He can handle the bat a little bit. You're just trying things. And it's not as much throwing stuff to see what sticks, but just trying to move things around and get a little bit of a jolt. And it looked like it was working for a bit, just didn't finish out in this game for the O's. And the other move was they moved Adley Rutschman out of the 2 hole and down to 5th in the Oriole order. And the third thing you need to know from this loss is that at the very least, if you're going to take one positive from this game, it's that Adley Rutschman looked like his old self. He had a game that we haven't seen from Adley in a long time. He goes 2 for 5 in this game with a single and a double and 3 hard hit balls. For Adley Rutschman, he had not had a game with 3 hard hit balls. That is 3 balls put in play with an exit velocity of 95 miles per hour or better. He had not done that in one game since July 30th. It was pre-trade deadline the last time Adley Rutschman put 3 balls in play at 95 miles per hour or more. It is kind of ridiculous how bad of a stretch he has been in, and that does a lot to put it in perspective. The 2 hits snapped in 0 for 12. It's been a larger slump, but that was kind of the mini slump he was in. And the double he had was his first extra base hit since August 24th. It's been a couple of weeks since he's had anything but a single. And here was the really interesting part. It's not just the hard hit balls, but balls hit over 100 miles an hour. Those are balls that really tend to end up as hits for big league hitters. He had his first ball hit over 100 miles an hour. His single in the first inning was 101.6 off the bat. Unfortunately, he just hit it too hard with runners on first and second and 1 out. Santander at second had to stop at third, and the O's unfortunately stranded him there, or it would have been an RBI for Adley. That was the first ball he had hit over 100 miles an hour off the bat since August 23rd. He won a stretch of 38 balls he put in play without hitting one over 100 miles an hour. Only 4 of those 38 were even hard hit balls. That's an 11% hard hit rate. Now, Adley's not a exit velocity monster, as I've talked about. He usually sits around 35, 40%. He squares up the ball, hits it on the barrel well. That's how he does his damage. But 11% is really, really, really bad. And that makes me still think that at some point there was some sort of injury there. But this is the best offensive game Adley's had in a long, long time. And that maybe, hopefully, it's just one game, but hopefully, because the quality of contact was better. So the underlying and the results for both better, that can lead to some better things for Adley Rutschman. Fourth thing you need to know from this loss as we switch it up to the pitching side, Cade Povich had, we'll say, an up and down night for the Orioles in this one. He continues his struggles on the road. He's got like a 12 ERA in road starts this year. 4 2/3, 4 runs on 5 hits, 5 strikeouts, 2 walks, and 2 homers on 76 pitches thrown by the left-hander Povich. 5 hard hit balls by the Red Sox, but they made those hard hit balls count. Certainly. Got in and out of a jam in the first inning, gave up a run, good inning in the second. Third got away from him. Cedric Mullins made maybe the catch of the year to rob Jarren Duran of probably a triple to lead off the third inning, but it didn't get any better. Rob Refsnyder, it was Rob Refsnyder, right? Yeah. He hit a 2-run homer. Tyler O'Neill followed up with a solo monster home run over the Green Monster. And all of a sudden, it was a 3-run inning, 2 bombs. It was 4-1 Red Sox in the bottom of the third. And he recovered. The next 2 innings were pretty nasty from Povich, and his sweeper was working. He had 8 whiffs on 10 swings against his sweeper. Then that was versus both righties and lefties, which was probably the best that pitch has looked in his big league career. So that's certainly a positive to take away for Cade Povich, but he just didn't trust his changeup. That was the part that was a little aggravating. And again, I get it was the White Sox, but he went 7 1/3 scoreless with 10 strikeouts and no walks in his last start. How did he do it? He threw a lot of good changeups to right-handed hitters. And the Red Sox, they went Duran, Devers to start the lineup, and then 7 consecutive right-handed hitters were in that Red Sox lineup, 3 through 9 against Cade Povich. Usually, that changeup can be the equalizer against righties. He threw some really good curveballs, which is also an equalizer for him against righties, but he's got to throw more changeups. He had just 8 of them that he threw on the day. That's not going to play. 5 of 8 were in the strike zone, but the one to Refsnyder, he left down the middle, and Refsnyder crushed it into center for a 2-run homer. Now, you can look at it this way. According to StatCast, neither of those home runs would have been homers at Camden Yards, and that's one of the reasons why Povich has been so much better at home this season. But it's still okay. It was up. It was down. It was what a rookie left-hander looks like when he's about 10 starts into his big league career, especially pitching at a place like Fenway Park that is not too kind to opposing pitchers, a lineup that hits lefties well in the Red Sox, and you kind of take what you can get from Cade Povich at this point with the ups and the downs of a rookie. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 12-3 loss to the Red Sox on Monday is that the O's certainly did not use the A bullpen. Povich came out of the game with 2 outs in the 5th. Burch Smith came in. First pitch was a liner off the monster in left. Colton Cowser and Adley Rutschman combined to make an insane play to get an out at the plate to end the inning and keep it a 4-2 game. I mean, 2 of the best defensive plays I've seen all season from the Orioles came in this game. The diving catch by Mullins, then the bare hand snag off the wall, and amazing throw and diving tag by Adley at the plate to throw from Cowser to get the out. And then Burch Smith went back out there in the 6th inning after getting that out, not really deserving the out, but getting the out on 1 pitch. And he didn't get a lot of great batted ball luck. There was a lot of bloop hits in there. I mean, he gave up 4 hits, did Burch Smith, and none of them were hard hit balls. That is some tough luck on 13 pitches, but he wasn't great. He was charged with 4 earned runs. Gregory Soto cleaned up his mess a little bit and looked solid again, despite giving up a couple of hits. Then Craig Kimbrell came in. He struck out the side, which was good to see. He was throwing more high fastballs, but he also gave up 2 hits and a walk and 2 runs. Cole Irvin gave up 2 home runs in mop-up duty in the 8th. And it ended up going from a 4-2 game to a 12-3 game by the end of it. And what it did tell you is, like, these are the guys, minus Soto, who's been, he had that stretch. It's 11 out of his last 12 appearances now without an earned run. He's been so much better lately. But you're looking at Kimbrell, Irvin, and Smith. Those are the bottom 3 in the pecking order right now, clearly in this Oriole bullpen. And if the O's can get Danny Coulombe and Jacob Webb hopefully back from injury soon, it would seem like Burch Smith and Cole Irvin are those first 2 guys to go. And after that, if the Orioles get anybody else back, or maybe want to call up Colin Selby, we might be inching towards just letting Kimbrell walk at this point. It's certainly a possibility, But a guy like Burch Smith, I think he's kind of run his course. I would personally just call up Colin Selby tomorrow, as long as he's healthy, and replace Burch Smith. But at the very least, if you can get Coulombe or Webb back, that's probably the first move that's going to go. And he does have options. You can just send him down to AAA. The magic is kind of run out a little bit right there. But speaking of getting pitchers back, the Orioles could be getting two of those relievers back, as I mentioned, in Danny Coulombe and Jacob Webb. We've gotten good news about both of them the past couple of weeks, but one more so than the other in the past couple of days. We'll talk about that coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Now, Game Time, best place to buy tickets, no doubt about it. But they've got a new feature called Game Time Picks, and it makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Now, the Orioles have only one homestand left. Next week, they've got the Tigers and they've got the Giants. If you want to get some tickets to those games, you want to go to Game Time. They've got seat views. You can see where you're sitting. They've got the lowest price guarantee, and the Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to save more on tickets to Orioles games. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. So I mentioned how it's becoming pretty clear who the Orioles will be jettisoning from their bullpen once, hopefully soon, they get Jacob Webb and Danny Coulombe back from injury. They seem to be marching closer and closer. And we got some updates on those guys as Drew French talked to Rakabako for a story on Monday. And let's start with Danny Coulombe because he had by far the most positive update. Coulombe, who's now thrown 2 live BP sessions on the mound at Camden Yards, was feeling good doing it. He will start his rehab assignment Wednesday in AAA Norfolk. Now, you would think how these things usually go. Guys get at least 2 rehab outings. So you're looking at Wednesday and then probably either Friday or Saturday, he would throw again in AAA. And then say it's Saturday, we'll play it safe. You would definitely want to give him the day off Sunday. The Orioles have an off day, I believe, on Monday, if I remember correctly. And then you look at Tuesday, they come back home to take on the Giants. If all goes well, it could be a week from today that Danny Coulombe, and that would be best case scenario, but a week from today that Danny Coulombe, if he stays healthy and the rehab assignments go okay, he returned to the Oriole bullpen. And I don't know if I'm going to expect Danny Coulombe to be immediately the pitcher he was last year or throughout this season before he got injured. But when he went down, he was the best pitcher in this Orioles bullpen. 2.42 ERA in 26 innings, 28 strikeouts to just 3 walks on the season. 13 hits allowed in 26 innings. He had stranded every single inherited runner he had come in with on base throughout the year before he went down with that just kind of odd elbow injury and had the bone chips in there and had to get him removed and still had the surgery, not anything like Tommy John, but still had to miss a good chunk of time. Even if he's not 100% Danny Coulombe that we've seen over the last year and a half, he is still going to be a huge boost to this Oriole bullpen. He will once again become their high leverage lefty, between Cionel Perez and Gregory Soto and Keegan Aiken. They've been trying to figure out who they can truly trust in that role. It's mostly been Perez, but he still hasn't been great at times. They were hoping it would be Soto. That hasn't really happened yet since the trade. Coulombe is a guy they desperately need back in there, and hopefully that can come soon. Now, for Jacob Webb, his rehab started earlier, back on September 1st. That was 9 days ago. He pitched in a brief rehab assignment in AAA. It went well. They scheduled his next rehab outing for September 4th. That was last Wednesday. They did it in AA because I think AA Bowie was at home. Norfolk was on the road, so it made it much easier to say, hey, stay in Bowie, much closer to the stadium. If this goes well, we'll call you up to Baltimore. Well, that was 6 days ago. And even though Drew French was talking to Rock about the injured pitchers, he didn't really say much at all about Jacob Webb. And the fact that he hasn't pitched in now 6 days on rehab, and you can't take a lot from stats from minor league rehab assignments. Guys are just trying to throw all their pitches and make sure they're working. They're not necessarily like sequencing a whole lot to hunt strikeouts. But when you pitch in a double A game and you get one out and you walk a batter and you allow 2 hits and you allow 4 earned runs without a strikeout, that's a little concerning. Again, you don't want to take too much, but when you add that to the fact that then he doesn't pitch again for now 6 days and we're not getting any updates on him, that is concerning me about Jacob Webb. Now, we haven't heard anything in the positive or negative direction since then, so I don't want to completely jump the gun here, and he could be just needing a little further rest, and then maybe, at some point this week he rejoins the Oriole bullpen. That would be great. But all this makes me worry a little bit that he might have had a bit of a setback. And it doesn't mean it's some huge setback where, he's done for the year, but it could be something that pushes him back even further. And even though he's not the greatest reliever in the world, he's been really good this year when he was healthy. The bullpen's coming together a little better, but he would still be super helpful in that middle relief role. Like, you just look at what happened to Burch Smith on Monday night. That's Jacob Webb's spot. That is precisely pretty much where Jacob Webb would pitch and do a better job of keeping you in a game and giving your offense a chance to come back late. It's just not what the O's have had from righty middle relievers since Webb went down. So they really miss him as well. Just the lack of updates worries me a little bit, especially because it was an elbow issue. That's going to worry you no matter what. Just at this point, I'm hoping for one of the two back. If they can get Coulombe or Webb back, at the very least, that's going to help. I don't know if you can count on both being back, just with them both having some elbow issues. Now, luckily for Grayson Rodriguez, who is the best pitcher still on the injured list for the Orioles, at least the best pitcher who has a chance of coming back this year that's still on the injured list, at least it wasn't an elbow issue, and at least it was a lat issue that he's already had once before and already said, hey, it was not as severe as the lat injury he had that basically ended his 2022 season in the minors, in June. However, when you start to think about the Grayson timeline, despite the fact that there's time left in the season and he's making progress, you start to worry if he can really fully rejoin this rotation. So we'll break down what Drew French had to say about Grayson Rodriguez, and we'll talk about, okay, what does this timeline actually look like for Grayson coming back? That is up next to finish off the pod. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Now, you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book, but we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And we're into the NFL season now. No better time to get on that deal for NFL Sunday Ticket. No better time to take a look at some of those lines on NFL Sunday as well. And you can do it at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. So we finished today talking about Grayson Rodriguez, and certainly the Orioles rotation. Cade Povich wasn't amazing on Monday night. He was okay, but the Orioles rotation in the absence of Rodriguez has honestly been pretty good. And now that they've got Zach Eflin back, which is great, they've sort of stabilized to this point. We're looking at Burns, Eflin, Suarez, Kramer, and Povich. It's not the most intimidating 5 that anybody's got out there among the playoff teams here this year, but they've done their job. We know how good Albert Suarez has been. Povich has been up and down. Eflin's been amazing. Burns is turning it back around. And Kramer, take out the start where he got hit by the line drive, has been really, really good lately. So that's been super helpful. But there's always been this aura around the rotation, basically for the past month, that just wait till Grayson comes back. Wait till Grayson comes back. Once they get Grayson back, they'll be good. And Albert Suarez filling in for him has been great. We've heard, okay, mid to late September, they'll get Grayson back. We'll get a couple regular season starts. He'll be a full go in the postseason. And, even without Bradish and Means and Wells, you look at Burns, Rodriguez, Eflin, you're feeling really, really good about that top 3 in the rotation in the postseason, because you usually need a number 4 starter a couple of times in the playoffs, but you can get by with just a set of 3 starters for most of the postseason. We saw the Diamondbacks get to the World Series with basically 2.5 starters last year. But here's the issue. Drew French, in that piece with Rockabaco, talked about Grayson Rodriguez's current recovery, and he did give some good updates. French said that Grayson Rodriguez, after throwing his first bullpen earlier this week, that they are hopeful to get a live bullpen session in sometime soon, and then, quote, get a rehab assignment started pretty soon. Now, he didn't give out any kind of dates, but hey, a rehab assignment started pretty soon. that is certainly good news. But also in terms of kind of talking about, okay, what's Grayson's role going to be like when he gets back? What could this look like? French said, quote, everything is on the table at this point. Potentially, you would think alluding to Grayson may be coming back as a reliever, or at the very least, not as a full rear-end, ready-to-go 7 innings starting pitcher. Now, let's look at this timeline. The final game of the Norfolk Tide season in AAA, AAA is the longest-running minor league level, is Sunday, September 22nd. So that is 12 days from now. The minor league season ends pretty much across the board. I don't believe any Orioles teams are making the minor league postseason. So the 22nd is the final day that you could pitch in true rehab games. Now, that doesn't mean you can't go to Florida and pitch in, like some simulated games. You can't pitch sim games and more live BP just among other guys with the team at Oriole Park. Like, those things can all happen, but it's hard to simulate the game environment. And the easiest way to do it is a AAA rehab game. So let's say that Grayson does the live BP session sometime this week, and then maybe he's ready by Saturday, maybe Sunday. Let's say Sunday. This Sunday, the 15th, he's ready to go out on rehab. At the most, you could start Sunday the 15th and then Sunday the 22nd, or Saturday the 21st. You're going to get 2 rehab starts at most in AAA Norfolk. Will 2 rehab starts be enough to build him fully up? They could be. They absolutely could be. But for some guys, that is not enough time. And if he's delayed a little bit longer, he can only end up with time to make 1 rehab start. That's certainly a possibility in AAA as well. And again, that doesn't mean he can't build back up in other ways to be ready to return to the big leagues. But French talked about this. Like, the Orioles are up against the clock right now with Grayson Rodriguez. And if you really break down this timeline, he's right. I mean, even if he gets 2 rehab assignments, say he pitches on the 21st for his second one, he's not ready to pitch in a big league game till September 26th. That's basically the end of the season. That gives you 1 big league regular season start that Grayson could return for. Now, again, if he's quicker on rehab, maybe he gives you 2, but that's the reality of the situation. There's basically no way that unless he's pitching in like 2-inning opener stints, Grayson Rodriguez makes more than 2 regular season starts before this year is over. And it's seeming more and more likely if he comes back as a fully fledged starter, he's only going to have time to make 1 regular season start. So that worries you for 2 reasons. One is, how much can he give you in the playoffs? And 2 is, if you're in a battle, you're a game behind the Yankees, maybe against the Yankees that final week, are you going to trust to give the ball to Grayson Rodriguez in that spot in a huge game when he's maybe not fully built up and you're just trying to get him on the field? And then if you get to the postseason, is he still going to be fully built up? Is he going to be more of like a 4-inning guy at that point, which can still absolutely help you? If he's anything, if he can give you anything, he is going to be on this playoff roster, and they're going to pitch him in some sense to help them win. He's just too good to not do that. But will he be fully built up? All of this is to say, this is why winning this division with the O's now a game and a half back is so important. Because if you win the division, the season ends on Sunday, September, 29th. You don't play again until until Saturday, October 5th. You get 5 days off to reset your rotation, get more rest. Grayson could be good to go by game 2 or 3 of that ALDS. If you don't win the division, you're playing in the wild card, you get 1 day off, and then Tuesday, October 1st, you begin the wild card series. And if you're the Orioles, yeah, maybe you're feeling like, okay, I go Burns and Eflin game 1 and 2, but you like Grayson Rodriguez in that game 3 on Thursday, October 4th. Is he going to be fully ready to go 6-7 innings if he needs to by then? Maybe not. And maybe if he gives you 3 or 4 innings in a start, that's good enough to keep you in a game 3. But are you going to trust a guy like that with the season on the line in game 3 of the wild card series? There's just a lot of questions with this timeline. And again, it seems like if all the rehab goes well, he's at least going to be on the playoff roster, hopefully get at least 1 regular season start and be some part of this pitching staff. But the whole point is to say, I've been mostly convinced for a while now that, okay, at some point he'll be full go, even if it's for 1 start and then the playoffs, he'll be full go back into the rotation. With the current timeline, when you lay it out, I'm not sure that's the case anymore. He'll pitch for the O's if he's healthy, but you can't rely on Grayson Rodriguez to potentially give you go out there and be a dog for 6 1/3 innings in a playoff start. He might just not be ready to come back and do that. And the O's, while they're going to want to push him a bit because they're trying to win a World Series, they're not going to push him so hard that they mortgage his future and further his injury just to try and get him back for this year. It's a tough decision for him. It's a tough decision for the Orioles. They're in a tougher spot than I thought. And if you don't have Grayson as a full go starter, you're looking at Burns, Eflin, Suarez with Dean Kramer behind him. Like, you're feeling a little bit worse, clearly, about the Orioles' postseason rotation. So hopefully things go perfectly to plan. He can come back for 1, maybe even 2 starts in the regular season and be a full go for the postseason. But it's not a given anymore. And that's just another tick to add to this injury situation for this Orioles team that's, been in a rut for a bit now, been playing basically 500 baseball for half a season now, half a season's worth of games. They're like 40-40 in their last 80, I believe. You add in all the injuries, you add in all this, it's still a team that I think can win the World Series. They've got the talent. There's no super team. Everybody's got a lot of flaws. Trust me. That's the reason why the O's have struggled so much, and they're still only a game and a half behind the Yankees. However, this is just another hit here, and the O's have the talent to overcome it. And hopefully Grayson could even be some sort of like Kevin Gausman type 2014 weapon to give you multiple innings out of the bullpen and have the stuff play up. That could be really intriguing for the O's as well. But it's just, if you were thinking, oh, he'll be back in the rotation and all good, that may not be the full case for Rodriguez at the end of this year. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. Orioles in action for Game 2 again tonight at Fenway Park. It's Albert Suarez on the bump for the Orioles, looking to rebound from a tough start against the White Sox. He'll go up against Cutter Crawford, the right-hander, with a 4.08 ERA, who the O's have seen a couple of times already this season. And then I'll be back tomorrow to recap Game 2 between the O's and the Sox. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.